Good morning, dear colleagues. It's a pleasure for me to welcome you to the second day of the Veterinary Awareness Day. My name is Tony Humphreys, and I work here at the agency heading up a task force on regulatory science and innovation. So it's a great pleasure to welcome you to this this parallel breakout session, 4.2 on the agenda, and it's called Collaboration with Academia. And over the course of the next sort of hour and a half, then I'll be joined by a panel of three colleagues who I will introduce as and when they actually are making their presentations. But the concept of the day is essentially to start off with a broader reflection on collaboration with academia and regulatory science from the sort of agency sort of perspective, and then to have a more deeper dive with regards to coordination and collaborative regulatory science and research activities within the vet sort of area, and then also reflection on the support and assistance offered by the agency to veterinary academic stakeholders primarily. And if I can just move on into a slide that sort of breaks that down in terms of timeframes. Yeah, so indeed, I'm joined now. I don't know whether you'll be able to visualize them, I think, as and when they're introduced on the presentation, but you have to take my word, they're here in the room beside me right now. To my right, I have Ralph Herald, who will walk us through the more general reflection, collaboration with academia on regulatory science activities. And thereafter then both Anna Vidal and Valentin Nicorescu will dive in then more with the vet-specific reflections, both on the regulatory science and on the support and assistance offered. The target the colleagues have been set is to essentially break down a hell of a lot of information into 20-minute chunks. So let's see how successful we are on that. But we know that's an awful lot of information to throw at you, and we will then be breaking after each speaker to add, if you have any questions of clarification or indeed on any aspect that you'd like to raise. I believe that's possible, and if you've been on the session yesterday or the day one, you'll know the methodology for that. But through the WebEx chat system, you're going to be able to raise questions, and then they will be assisted in trying to address them as best we can. If you don't manage to get a question in sort of at the end of each section, don't worry. We then have a sort of extensive Q&A session before it takes us then to hopefully a well-end coffee break at 11 o'clock. So that's pretty much the morning, and it's all about us. We have an awful lot of information to throw at you, and really it's only successful if some of it sticks or resonates with you. So we really do encourage you to ask any of the questions that you may have, because that will then make the session more worthwhile. With that being said, then I'll introduce my first colleague to address the collaboration with academia and regulatory science and activities. It's Dr. Ralph Herald, and he actually heads up a regulatory science and academic sort of liaison office here at the agency. He's got many, many years experience here in the agency and others, which are summarized in the notes, but I won't delay the morning anymore with that. So I'll pass over right now to Ralph, who will guide us through the general reflection on collaboration with academia. Please, Ralph.
Thank you very much indeed, Tony. It's a great pleasure to be here and to be talking to you, and also look forward to the questions that you're having. And the idea is to start high level, as Tony just kindly explained. So I want to take you all through the idea of what is it about EMA and academia. And it is all about engagement together for public health and veterinary health purposes. So there's a strategy behind. We'll talk briefly about the regulatory science that drives our conversations and activities, and how that links to innovation, and in particular some high-level opportunities that we want to make you aware of. This will then feed into my colleague's presentation later on. We really have to start from the very top, and I want to put here up the mission and the main activities of the European Medicines Agency. To foster scientific excellence in the evaluation and supervision of medicine for the benefit of public and animal health in the European Union keeps us going here in a number and range of activities that you see on the right-hand side of the slide here. Of course, these are product-related activities in the support of research and introducing innovation, but it goes right down to the monitoring. And then at the bottom, a piece that we want to talk about today a bit more in focus, about the regulatory science that is one of the foundations based on which we're operating, and we're engaging with academia developers and other developers and health professionals. So it's this broad set of the mission and the main activities that provides a platform for our engagement together for the benefit of animal health that is particular in the focus today. So if we are having this plan to engage with stakeholders, EMA has since long a record to have this structured and organized, and over many years since the inception of the agency, structured in a way that we are talking with patients, healthcare professionals, academia, and industry. There are four main levels or ways that I want to expose a bit here. And this is that, of course, we particularly want to make sure that all relevant information is available and that really drives the practical activities, both in the development of medicines, but also in the use of medicine. So the high quality information, just think of the pandemic that we have now gone through, is a main part of the way that we're engaging with stakeholders. And we are constantly also working to optimize the way of information that we are sharing and that we are preparing to inform. But we're also consulting. We are sitting in Amsterdam, but that is for us the centerpiece of the center of Europe, where we are convening from across the globe experts, stakeholders, patients, veterinary health experts, so that we can guide our activities through the latest experience and the practical input that we can obtain from you. And then we take it further. We also involve directly in a couple of activities that you see exemplified here. There are many meetings that are now being picked up, and this is one of them where we're laying groundworks for involvement, many conferences and public hearings that serve to involve and not only listen, but enable us to take action on your information and on perhaps also the other way around, that helps you to be better informed about what the agency is doing and how the agency's output can be better used in public and veterinary health. And then there's the fourth element that is also particularly important, that we have ways of cooperating and participating directly. And we have certain advisory groups as well as expert groups, focus groups, but also research projects, and I will come back to that, and some of my colleagues will go into depth at that. But just think of this as a main framework in which we are structuring the way that EMA is engaging with stakeholders. And indeed, we have substantial experience over the years. On the left-hand side, you see a framework that already is based on experience. We created it in 2016, and that sets out a framework for collaboration between EMA and academia. And this acknowledges the importance of academia. And in fact, I want to say academia are a strategic partner for us. We are seeking to collaborate with academia to promote and further develop regulatory support so that we can better help translating academic research into novel methodologies and medicines. This is a recognition of the innovation forces that are driving academia and that we want to also absorb and best serve through using the expertise that comes from academia and feeding it into the regulatory decision-making. But there are also elements of research that we would like to flag to you. These are open questions, for example, where we think that it would be particularly important for academia to engage. And then we hope to get back from academia, for example, novel methodologies, approaches, etc., that then can be promoted more generally for the development of products. After the 2016 framework, we published in 2021 the regulatory science strategy that has as a common goal for human and veterinary medicines strategic objectives that speak to the role of academia as a strategic partner, as exemplified there on the top right side, partnerships to advance difficult questions in regulatory science and in development. Now, this is all the framework. I want to now go a little bit more practical, and what the idea for daily operations is to create a virtuous cycle. We want to listen and learn from academic developers so that we also can provide the best regulatory support to you back, in that we are helping to translate academic research into novel methodologies that then can benefit developing new medicines. We also, on the right-hand side, want to flag knowledge gaps that exist and that could help us to even better foster novel medicines and novel approaches. So then at the bottom, this turns into the cycle where the knowledge gaps inform the research needs. And then if also academic developers engage, we create that cycle that allows the faster and better development of new medicines. So if this is the idea, what are we currently doing to practically interface with academia? Very practically, you see here the top direction where academia approaches us, and then EMA uses one of the ways of engagement that I've explained before, inform, consult, involve. And academia engages us through asking questions, for example, through our interface Ask EMA. They're also often approaching us with offers for collaboration. There's huge funding and international and EU level research projects that approach EMA for input, for expertise, and we then find ways to support these activities. Academia also approaches us often with questions about how can we join and support through providing training their activities. And then a last important track that feeds into the EMA is that academia can help and provide expertise for product procedures. That's a very well-established pathway where academia experts are invited to contribute to the assessment of difficult assessment questions of veterinary and human medicines. But there's then also the arrow back to academia. And this makes what I just said before, the virtuous cycle, a bit more practical. We published the regulatory science research needs to flag areas where we have frequently come across problems. And we're going to go into detail a bit later, so I'm not going to belabor this. But we're also seeking academia to engage through our public consultations on guidances, on principles, on concept papers. They're regularly published and are a means of introducing your experience through comments that you provide to our draft documents. EMA also has the ability to tender out a couple of studies that help us to address gaps. And we're particularly also hoping to learn from workshops from academia. Earlier this year, we had a workshop on mRNA medicinal products to dive deep into the questions that drive and that perhaps are insufficiently solved for their development. And these workshops are really important for us to find out about how we can better support, as regulators, the development of important medicines. Expert groups are sending their invites to academia so that we can create standing groups that provide input on questions that come up all the time. And then we have an engagement on specific projects with EMA, for example, as a result of these public funded research projects. So if this is all about regulatory science, I think we need to talk briefly about regulatory science and what is actually regulatory science. I mentioned it is the basis of our daily work, and it is, in a way, a certain language that allows us to combine various sciences into regulatory activities. And if regulatory science is the language at the bottom of this triangle, it is, for example, expressed in our research needs. Research is needed on the relationship between SAIDS data, veterinary medicinal product types and species to advance to adverse event data in ultravigilance. So that is an expression of a scientific question with regulatory connections and regulatory tools and regulatory touch points. We are using that type of language then on the next level for scientific advice. For example, there are questions such as, does the CVMP agree to the use of X for the treatment of Y without additional studies given the current experience? And that brings together scientific elements with an aspect of regulatory decision-making, and this time on the development. On the next level, generalizing from a single product, we have guidelines that express regulatory science principles, and that, for example, in here, the variability both on the method and on the product level have to be considered. And on the top, so to say, this is all then employed, the regulatory science language, the scientific advice, the guidelines for product assessment, where the decision-making concerns the recommendation for authorization of a medicine. And here there is a balancing of the available data and the limitations, as well as the conclusions that are anticipated. So this is what we're thinking of when we say regulatory science. And now, as regards the academia stakeholders, I want to say that we want to talk regulatory science with you all. And this is with individuals, with academic groups who are developing medicines and methodologies. We want to talk regulatory science with European research consortia. And on the right-hand side, we also are engaging and want to talk regulatory science and research with a number of establishments and organizations. And this includes increasingly not-for-profit organizations engaged in research and development. So I'm now moving to how we can get started. And a first entry point for you that I want to make you aware of is that we would be very happy to see your registration as an academic stakeholder. We already have more than 50 veterinary academic organizations, I believe, in our stakeholder database. And we are both inviting individuals, but in particular also organizations that are not for profit engaged in medicine regulatory science to register. Your benefit will be that we will keep you in the loop proactively and approach you for opportunities to work on regulatory science matters, to collaborate, to exchange, and to be part of this virtuous cycle that I have laid out before. So the slides will be up later, but please be invited to register. If you are an organization, send us an email at academia@ema.europa.eu so that we can get back to you. There's a different registration process. And this is just the entry point, as I said. More specifically then, we also have ways that we can welcome academia to work at the European Medicines Agency on regulatory science. And I want to briefly mention 3 programs that we have. And this is the Collaborating Expert Program, the traineeships, and the Seconded National Experts. Seconded National Experts are persons who come from the sector of academia, the academic sector. And we are inviting applications to join us as National Seconded Expert through our vacancy notes in the careers portal. All the links will be active in the slide later on. And we're asking for seconded national experts because we acknowledge the high level of professional experience and knowledge that would help us at the EMA to work on difficult questions, how to future-proof, how to address scientific matters, how to do research on regulatory science data that we hold. This would be typically for a couple of years here at the EMA in Amsterdam, and it would mean that the expert remains in their contract, but would be seconded here to the agency. It comes with a number of benefits, and I've put here the links that you could look up yourself. We currently have over 40 such experts. It is an extremely well-working way of interacting. So I'd encourage you, if that's not yet already known to you, to have a look at our vacancy notes. We are also inviting collaborating experts, and this is more for specific projects and for a duration that is relevant for the specific project. The collaborating experts would typically work remotely or here on site, and we have come to a pattern where around May or June, we're publishing in the careers portal a number of projects for which we are seeking to work with such a collaborating expert. This would be, for example, leading to presentations or scientific publications, and then could be the basis for further work. It's really driven by certain projects and scientific questions, and these questions can come both from academia, interest to work with data at EMA and with colleagues that are at EMA here in the veterinary division on these questions. And last but not least, I want to mention that every year we come a good number of trainees at the agency. So completed their studies and then would stay for 10 months here at the agency also to work on specific projects. But this is integrated with core activities. They would much gain experience that would help them in their professional career. And there's quite a number of support activities here. And this is then leading me to say that working at the EMA on regulatory science does contribute to advance regulatory science. And many publications have come out of this engagement as seconded national expert, collaborating expert, and trainee. And you can see on the left-hand side, just the very latest ones. There are many more that address pertinent questions in regulatory science. And I have to say that many of these publications, I guess, wouldn't have seen the light if it hadn't been for the experts, for the drive, and for the input. So also a thank you message here to all who have been here. And some of the colleagues who had joined the EMA have left their testimony on YouTube for those who are interested, whether you are in the situation I've described or you are mentoring younger students in university. Please have a look. I think this is quite nice way to see how it is practically looking like. And also there's a huge community on LinkedIn of these former colleagues. I want to finish with 2 slides that go back now to the big picture, because all these regulatory science activities that I've exemplified map into our regulatory science strategy. And that strategy that is currently running to 2025, but will have a successor activity to go further. This strategy is a strategy of the European Medicines Agency embedded with the network of medicines regulatory agencies across Europe and the world. And our strategy is to build a more adaptive regulatory system that does encourage innovation in human and veterinary medicine. So the strategy is really to advance the system and to facilitate a better development and provision of medicines in the future. So that leads me to just summarize the key points that from my presentation about academia collaborating with EMA, I want to make you aware of. Academia are a truly important stakeholder for EMA. We have different ways of engagement, but we are here for a conversation to find out what would be of interest to you and how we could combine our interests into some practical ways of working. We are also increasingly seeing academia as part of the not-for-profit developers, and we provide them a comprehensive set of support options. So please don't hesitate to get in contact. There is support and pathways can be found. We also are increasingly engaging with academia on regulatory science itself, on the way we are regulating, on the principles, on the standards that go into regulatory decision-making. And this comes from our side where we do face difficult regulatory issues and looking to apply the scientific method so that we can advance and more generalize. And at the same time, on the other end, we also are aware that we need to disseminate more and engage in training, and also are ready to discuss the broad range of engagement with academia. This will then result in a benefit for regulatory science, and the benefit for regulatory science has already started to manifest in better public and veterinary health. We will accelerate developments. I've mentioned this a couple of times, and we believe in true multi-stakeholder collaboration because we have to serve animal and human health across the board. So with that, I want to thank you very much, and then back over to you, Tony.
Yeah, many thanks, Ralph, for kicking off the morning with that very broad but comprehensive overview. And I very much like you took us from the strategic motivation as to why we want to engage with academia, and then reflecting on the many practical sort of avenues by which that then is made possible. As highlighted at the beginning of the session, we'll just pause now in case one or more colleagues online wants to ask a question before I then to Ralph on clarification or otherwise. I'll pause. I know this is radio silence, which is always a deadly concept online, but okay. It's not the case. Okay, so colleagues, as previewed, if you do have questions, that are even on further thought on that, we will be having a more general Q&A then after the remaining presentations. So thank you very much for attention on that. Okay, so now we move in. We zoom in a little bit more with the vet focus, and it's a great pleasure of mine to introduce Dr. Anna Vidal, who's a scientific specialist here at the agency. She works in the Veterinary Strategy and Support Office, and she's a particular role in coordinating veterinary regulatory science research activities and also strategic advice on One Health issues. So Anna, please, over to you.
Thank you very much, Tony, for the introduction, and good morning, everyone. It is really a great pleasure also for me to be here today to present to you some of the activities that are supporting our role in advancing regulatory science for the benefit of public health and animal health. So just to give you an outline of my presentation, I will start by just picking up from what we have just heard earlier on from Ralph's presentation on the regulatory science strategy and the veterinary goals, in particular the goal that actually makes reference to how we need to enable and support regulatory science. And then I will give you examples of some of the activities that are supporting regulatory science, such as the science research needs, how we engage with externally funded regulatory science activities, and also briefly an overview of how the EMA can actually procure research projects that can support, of course, the area of regulatory science. And then I will finish off with a summary and conclusions from this presentation. I would like to start by actually looking at the definition of regulatory science. And I think Ralph already introduced us to this concept. But of course, if you look at in the literature, there are lots of different definitions about regulatory science, but I would like to use the one that we have in our regulatory science strategy. And that one is defines regulatory science as the range of scientific disciplines that can be applied to the assessment of medicinal products, to the quality and safety and efficacy assessment, and that actually help to inform decision-making through the life cycle of a medicine. It includes not only basic science, but also, in fact, quite importantly, applied sciences and social sciences, and contributes to the development of standards and tools. The successful, and we believe, and this is what Ralph already started to highlight, that the successful implementation of regulatory science and having at the core of this the engagement, which is very important, and we have heard a lot about it with the diverse stakeholders, including academia, will allow us, the agency, to fulfill our mission, not only today, but also to be prepared for the challenges of tomorrow. So there are three elements here that I think you can pick up from the definition, and the importance of regulatory science to provide us with the up-to-date knowledge and expertise that we regulators need for the assessment of medicines. Secondly, the fact that that science should aim to develop new tools and new standards and new methods for the assessment of veterinary medicines, but also highlights the importance of doing this in collaboration and doing this working closely between regulators, academia, and other stakeholders. So this is, again, just to go back to the regulatory science strategy as a background, and this is the goal in our strategy for the veterinary in particular, to actually enable, and the importance of enabling research and innovation in regulatory science, and some of the actions that are really part of it, which includes key 4 actions that Ralph already has mentioned: networks with and partnerships with academia, the importance of collaboration, which I already said, and you will hear that topic throughout our session today. Identify and enable access to the best expertise and make sure that we contribute to build the capacity and the capability with knowledge and expertise. And finally, disseminate and exchange, and this is very important as well, to contribute to make sure that the knowledge and the science and the expertise is actually communicated properly and disseminated properly to the wider audience. I will start with one of the areas, or one of the activities that I think is supporting all of this, and you probably are aware that as a result of the consultation that put together or led to the publication of the regulatory science strategy to 2025, as a result of that, it was a good opportunity to actually ask our stakeholders to come up with key areas, things that I think they need to be addressed to support and advance the science that we need to answer the questions and help us with our work. And this led to the publication of a list of research needs, in particular for veterinary domain. As I said, came up out of the consultation that underpinned the regulatory science strategy. It was organized according to those core recommendations in the strategy. And you can see in the document a long list, in fact, of needs detailed by topic, including the objectives and also the anticipated impact that the community, the stakeholders felt that it would derive from those areas. And this was inspired, actually, this is not new, this is something that there are lots of different examples from US, from FDA, in particular Australia as well, and also at the EU level. I mean, we have the example from the Netherlands, which they also have these research strategies, and they also publish their research needs. And this document contains, in fact, more than 100 research questions. More than 80, of course, focus on the human domain, and we have more than 40 that actually applied to the vet domain. And I put the link here, so I invite you to just browse the list, the document. This is just what I said. This is how the list was created, and it was at the time when we were putting together the regulatory strategy, where we did a number of interviews with experts, with EMA colleagues, and across the network. We also conducted a literature review, and we incorporated lots of different inputs in consultation with our stakeholders. And that led to a draft list that was then put forward for consultation with some of our EMA bodies and experts, but also throughout the network again. And the final list was, of course, shared with our stakeholders as well for consultation. So quite a lot of work, more than 600 comments. The colleagues had the opportunity to rank the different research needs. And that's how the list was created and published in 2021. So what are the needs for the veterinary domain then that are in this document? As I said, they are organized following the 4 key strategic goals of the regulatory science strategy. The first one actually is looking at how we can integrate innovation and science and technology into our work. So you can see here, of course, it's quite small in the slide, I realize, but you have elements like the 3 Rs area, novel manufacturing methods. And of course, at the time when all the consultation was done, it was the time when we actually started to put together the plan for implementing the new veterinary regulation. And that's why the transformation and how to transform the regulatory framework was one of the key areas that people felt we had to invest into. The second area in the strategy is, of course, to actually support the scientific evaluation, and you will see key areas that will resound to you as important in terms of gaps in the science, and that's environmental risk assessment, of course, safety of residues, issues with pharmacovigilance and how we can move that area forward, and how to improve, of course, in general, the assessment of the veterinary medicines, in particular, how to come up with the right benefit risk evaluation and assessment. The third area of the regulatory science is, of course, emerging health threats. And this is an important area. Here you will see data gaps in how we can keep encouraging the prudent use of antimicrobials, the data collection of antimicrobials, and how the science can actually contribute to advance that area, antiparasitic resistance, and of course, vaccines, and the topic that was present at the session yesterday about alternatives to antimicrobials. And last but not least is just to fulfill the role of actually engaging with academia, how and other stakeholders, and how that collaboration, that engagement would contribute to our regulatory science. This slide is just to represent how the agency, the agency, and what other mechanisms can or are there to enable that these research needs are fulfilled. And of course, we have in-house research. So here, colleagues in the agency, and of course, we hear from Ralph, collaborating experts and seconded national experts can actually use in-house data to do research in-house. We also, and I will talk a little bit about this later on, we also have the capacity to fund some of the research projects here internally, and I will explain a little bit about that later. Of course, we have the EU funding, and this is important as one of the key enablers to deliver and to fulfill data gaps in the knowledge through the different research frameworks at the EU level. And you probably all know about the Horizon Europe. That would be one of the key instruments to fund research in this area. And then, of course, we have other types of independent funding at national level, NGOs, private organizations, and so on. The regulatory science research needs, we see this as a living document. It's a life cycle. So we can identify research needs that, yes, we can enable to have that research delivered. And I explained the mechanisms by which that should give us results in the form of course, the obvious ones would be peer-reviewed publications, technical reports, studies, webinars, and quite an important one, expertise and knowledge. And that will then feed back into identify further needs, and that would close the cycle. But one element that is important in the cycle is the translation of this research into value for regulatory, for our day-to-day job. And that's the bit that I think is quite important, and I'm sure it's going to come up later on, but is how we use actually the science to inform our regulatory discussion, to support the development of our guidelines, to actually support the advice for the scientific advice, and so on, and to actually use that research that can be translated into action. I will move on to another activity that is supporting regulatory science here, and this is one that is great interest to me because I think it's very powerful, and this is engaging with externally funded regulatory science. We already heard earlier, there's a lot going on out there. There are lots of projects, lots of initiatives, and how do we engage with this? Over the past years, and I think this is quite something that is going on for a while now, the agencies often contacted by researchers, by consortium that are putting together research projects, and generally as part of the EU research funding scheme, such as the Horizon Europe. And we are often contacted by them. And why? And what is the reason? And I think this is, I will explain later on what is the win, but I think it's a win-to-win situation. And the reason, what is behind and the motivation to contact the EMA and to involve the EMA is that the EMA, we play a key role as central EU regulators. We can provide, of course, the pan-European perspective of regulation in veterinary medicines. And we also have the capacity to mobilize quite a lot of expertise and knowledge. So this is one of the main reasons. And of course, that interaction and that engagement contributes to increase the understanding of what is our role with amongst the academia stakeholders, but also to ensure that we can have access. This is is a mutual benefit, access to expertise from these academia partners. But that collaboration should help to advance the field of regulatory science, as I said earlier. And also our role is as well to facilitate the translation of this science from these academics into methodologies, products, and better regulation of medicines. So this is just the process that is published. So there is a document that actually lays out the procedure to engage with us in these research initiatives. It's quite a simple process, but it talks a little bit about what type of involvement the agency can have, and that goes normally from taking an advisory role all the way to actually be beneficiaries of the research project, or to have an associated partner role, for example, of the particular consortium. It has financial implications for us, and of course, it's very challenging sometimes to find the resources, and that's why it is very important that the research initiative actually aligns with our strategies and with our mandate, and supports our strategies, and as I said, supports the areas that are important to us. And it's also important to look at the added value that the initiative will bring in terms of facilitating collaboration, exposure, building knowledge within the network, and so on. And as I said, the procedure is quite simple in terms of contacting us and presenting to us the initiative and the proposal, and then that is discussed internally, and it is decided upon based on these criteria. One thing that I would say is that it is good that we are contacted earlier on in the process, although we can only commit, for example, when we talk about consortium, we can only commit to it after the competition stage, or the competition phase of the actual initiative. But it's good to contact us earlier on, because one of the things that we do as well is to advise the consortium and the research colleagues about other tools that we offer, and I think my colleague Valentin will cover that we offer in terms of scientific advice, ITF, and the importance that they include those aspects in the research projects. And this is just a slide that follows on from a recent paper that colleagues of mine here at the agency have co-authored, which is looking at our experience from the past few years on what are the benefits of us engaging with these externally funded regulatory science initiatives, what are the EMA contributions, and how we and also the research consortia or the academics can benefit from it. And there is a list here in terms of how we can contribute. So we can offer support tools, and Valentin will cover that in a minute. The knowledge on the regulatory environment, our experience from previous involvements in similar projects or relevant projects. We can have active contribution to work packages, and of course, as I said earlier, provide the insight from the regulatory perspective, which I think sometimes is missing, and I think it's important. We see it coming more and more. It is included, but it's important to make sure that those research projects include those aspects. In terms of our interest, of course, for us, it's important to be aware of those research initiatives and the results that derive from those initiatives, learning from talking to the scientists as part of the project, helping to identify and fill or close some of the gaps in regulatory science, try to advance and improve methods and standards and tools. And also we can play a role in disseminating those results and give visibility through publications and conferences and presentations. And for us, it's very important to, as I said earlier, to make sure that we have access to those networks of experts and expertise that will derive from that. If we look back, and for example, just to give you an example of what we have received since beginning of last year, we have been approached, and we are actually involved in over 30 Horizon Europe initiatives that have applied or have actually asked for the EMA to be involved. And there is an ongoing work for this to happen more often even, and we are talking with the funders at the EU level to make sure that this is promoted and that more and more the role of the agency in contributing to the knowledge cycle is recognized at that level. And yes, I think it'll be important looking forward to ensure that this engagement results in translation of outputs from science into regulatory outputs. I said earlier that I was going to give you a very quick overview about the procurement that we have in place that allows us to fund some research projects. this procurement system really includes a number of areas that we can actually, we have a limited budget of money where we can actually use to fund some of the most urgent research areas that we think are fundamental for our work. And the framework includes a total of 6 different areas. And as you can see there, one is specifically dedicated to studies that are relevant for the veterinary domain. Those studies, and I think the kind of the scope that we are looking at is quite wide, but we want to actually focus on studies that of course, will inform the efficacy and safety of veterinary medicines, but mainly we are looking at observational studies that can actually use existing data sources that can be then exploited to generate information that we are looking at. And on the right-hand side, you can see who are our framework contractors currently under the current framework. And those are Royal GD, which is based in the Netherlands, a consortium formed by Utrecht University and the Faculty of Veterinary Studies in Toulouse, and of course Wageningen Research. So these are the current framework contractors. The current framework will finish by the end of 2025, after which it will be renewed. So we will launch another call, and colleagues can, of course, at that time they would be able to apply for it and win or be awarded with a framework contract to deliver our research projects. And just to give you an example of one of the projects that we have currently funded under this framework, this is looking at an area that is a very strategic area for us in the vet division, which is looking at the big data in Veterinary Medicines Regulation. And the project is looking at developing a data landscape analysis. And the reason for this is basically, as I said, it is a very strategic area for us. It's trying to help us to move into a more data-driven regulatory environment. And so we put out this, we reopened the call for competition to our framework contractors, and Wageningen Research, they were awarded to deliver this research project, which is looking at look at what data sources are there that can be used for regulatory purposes. Identify those data, characterize them in terms of the relevance, the purpose, why they are collected, how can they be used for our benefit, and of course also try to start thinking about whether those data can actually be analyzed in terms of metadata analysis. And I think this is just at the end of the presentation. I would like just to do a few summary key points that I want the audience to kind of the take-home message from my presentation. Engagement with research activities is central to the work of the agency and is one of the guidance principles, in fact, of our mandate. It is defined, and we have heard this again and again in our regulatory network strategy, the EMA science strategy, and is also reflected in the agency's work program. It is important that the agency participate in the identification of research needs, but it's also important that we all collaborate and engage. Particular engagement with research partners, academics, but also funders is essential to advance the regulatory science. And I think we all can play a role in that, and the agency definitely can play an important role to advance regulatory science for the benefit of all of us. So I think with that, Tony, I will just finish with some acknowledgements to you and your team, and that support we work together on this area. And I will stop here. So Thank you very much.
No, many thanks for that, Anna, for a very comprehensive presentation, starting off with the motivation and the opportunities then for collaboration, drilling down on the always perennial issue of funding, like who's driving it, and both the external funders, the big ones, Horizon Europe, and indeed ourselves then. So again, colleagues, I will pause just briefly to see this. Are there any questions of clarification for Anna at this stage before we move on the session? And if not, indeed, if you can hold them then for the break. But so I believe, can we have Yeah. There may be one coming. Yes, yes, please.
So, good morning, everyone. I just received a question from Sarah. Dear all, many thanks for the informative talks. I am in academia, so this morning is an eye-opener. I am doing research in cancer with a primary aim, providing novel medical treatments for types of cancer that are rare in humans and common in dogs. This is a perfect example of one medicine approach. We do drug testing in vitro organoids. However, after selecting a drug based in vivo testing, testing in laboratory animals and tox studies in healthy dogs are still needed. This is very contradictory. Maybe this has already been addressed in one of the documents named in a presentation. However, if not, I would like to engage with EMA in future regulations. Thank you, Sarah.
I'm not too sure how much of a direct question that is, rather than a statement of intent with regards to potentially taking up one or more of the offers. I don't know whether Anna or indeed Ralph, because it was a sort of cross area One Health sort of question. Anna first since this is the session, but any reaction, Anna?
No, thank you very much for bringing that topic to us. And I think it's something that, again, if you want to get in touch, we would be very pleased to hear more about your research ideas and how we can help there with some of these initiatives. But I think this is one of the purpose and we think it's important that you engage with us, highlighting and bringing up these topics that could be important to pick up on.
Yeah, thank you. These are, I think, exactly the type of challenges that are very interesting. They have both the let's say, the practical product perhaps aspects as well as general aspects, the trade-offs, the balancing, and what could be ways to advance and to introduce new technologies and methodologies that we have been talking about. So I think it's an interesting question, and I think on the part of how to engage, we can hear from Valentin. I think this will become very clear. What are the options, and if these are not quite clear, we're of course available to be contacted later on for follow-up.
Okay, no, many thanks for that. So that's a nice segue into Valentin's presentation. And just by way of introduction, it's Dr. Valentin Nicorescu. He's a senior scientific specialist here at the agency. He works on a lot of sort of centralized applications, primarily on the efficacy aspects of veterinary medicine. And he also acts for his sins as scientific secretary to the CVMP Efficacy Working Party. So we always like to, that's a perennial sort of quest to understand the efficacy of any one or more treatment interventions. So Valentin, you will actually give us an insight now into the support and assistance offered by the agency, potentially to veterinary academic stakeholders, please.
Thank you, Tony, for this introduction, and good morning, everyone. Indeed, I will get you through the available support and assistance activities offered by the EMA, and I will try to particularly focus on academic stakeholders, because this is a session focused on academia. Okay. So my presentation will be divided into different parts. The first part will focus on the actual support and assistance activities available at the agency. And for this, I will present some practical aspects and procedural steps in relation to 4 different types of support activities. The first one is related to Innovation Task Force briefing meetings. The second one, the agency's activities in relation and the input expected from stakeholders and from academic stakeholders in particular in relation to scientific guidance. The third one, I will try to explain a bit the procedural aspects of scientific advice procedures, and the fourth area will be focusing on the support offered by the agency to small and medium-sized enterprises. And towards the end of my presentation, I will briefly give you some information and give you some details on the information and communication activities here at the agency, and of course focused on veterinary topics and relevant to academic stakeholders. Then the first part of the presentation is, as mentioned, is focused on support and assistance, and you saw this word innovation, and you heard it several times yesterday and also this morning. And I would like to once more try to emphasize that one of the EMA strategic goals is to foster research and the uptake of innovative methods in the development of human and veterinary medicine. So this is a general goal of the agency. For this, of course, the regulatory environment needs to understand and facilitate innovation. And that is why the agency tries to support the development of innovative methodologies by fostering collaboration across the network and with academia. In relation to innovation, probably the most relevant tool we have in place at the agency is in relation to Innovation Task Force, or the ITF, as currently addressed. It is this ITF is a multidisciplinary group at the agency, which includes scientific, regulatory, and legal competencies, and this was set up to ensure coordination across the agency. The objectives, there are two high-level, very general objectives of the ITF, and the first one is applicant-oriented, and that is to clarify aspects regarding the road to market of innovative medicines. In this regard, I would like to explain a bit that the ITF, through these meetings, aims to establish a platform for a very early dialogue with applicants, in particular academics and researchers, to proactively identify scientific, but also legal and regulatory issues, mostly related to novel therapies and technologies. At the same time, the ITF provides advice on the eligibility to agency procedures. So this is very important for academic stakeholders who are less familiar with these procedures. And of course, this advice is provided together with experts from the Committee for Veterinary Medicinal Products, scientific working parties, national competent authorities, and even European Commission. So we consider that this is very important for academics in the early stages of development, but I will come back to that, to this aspect. The second general objective is more like EMA or network oriented, and this is to ensure that the EMA and the network is aware and prepared for the assessment of the most recent developments in innovative medicine. So in this respect, the ITF's objectives are to assess and address the impact of novel therapies and technologies on the current scientific, legal, and regulatory requirements. Of course, this is done in relation to the CVMP, the Committee for Veterinary Medicine Products, and also working parties. And one other important aspect, considered very important for the EMA and for the network, is that this way we can identify the need for specialized expertise at an early stage, because it is very important to be prepared when these types of applications for novel veterinary medicinal products come in. The network, it is very important that the network is prepared for assessing these types of products. The tool through which the ITF provides advice is the briefing meeting, the ITF briefing meetings. And these are meetings with applicants intended to provide a forum for early dialogue on medicine's innovation. And they are intended to take place very early in the product development. And you see on the right-hand side, this roadmap from, let's say, from idea to marketing authorization to the actual product being placed on the market. And these ITF meetings are, again, intended to take place very early in the product development. They cover issues arising from innovative medicines development, new technologies, and borderline products. And this, from this point of view, again, regulatory, legal, scientific issues can be addressed during these types of these meetings. The meetings are intended to facilitate informal exchange of information and guidance on the development process. They sometimes are, take place as brainstorming sessions, discussions on scientific topics. And although I use the word informal exchanges, they are completely, they have this confidentiality aspect very clearly indicated. So everything which is discussed there remains confidential with the applicants, because it is very important to understand that we understand that a brilliant idea should be kept between all the parties involved until it becomes it can become public, so it can be shared publicly. These briefing meetings, as mentioned before, are attended by the experts from the agency network, scientific committees, in our case the CVMP, and working parties. And I give the specific example of NTWP, because these meetings are especially designed for innovative products. And a very important aspect at the bottom of the slide: these meetings are free of charge. So the agency does not charge any fee for these meetings. On a procedural aspect and practical aspect, how it goes, how to request an ITF briefing meeting. It is the request form is available. This form needs to be filled in, and then it should be sent to a dedicated email address at the agency. Then the EMA colleagues responsible review this form and advise applicants on how to proceed next. The applicant prepares then a submission via a dedicated platform, and then together with the applicant, a date is set, and the meeting takes place. In relation to for each type of activity, at the bottom of usually the last slide, I included some links to the important information and additional details which can be consulted. So in relation to ITF briefing meetings, there is a step-by-step guide and also a landing page with a lot of information should you be interested in consulting it. The second type of support and assistance activity is related to scientific guidelines, and these scientific guidelines are the scientific guidance is designed to help applicants prepare their marketing authorization applications for veterinary medicinal products. This guidance is prepared by the Committee for Veterinary Medicinal Products in conjunction with its working parties. And a very important aspect of this guidance is that the guidelines reflect a harmonized approach across the EU member states and also at the EMA on how to understand and apply the legal requirements in relation to quality, safety, and efficacy of veterinary medicinal products. And this way, everybody has the same understanding on how to apply legislation. And when I say legislation, of course, yesterday you heard many times about the Veterinary Medicinal Products Regulation 2019/6, and its Annex 2. In Annex 2 of this regulation provides the technical requirements on how to on what data need to be presented in an application for a veterinary medicinal product. Of course, it is expected that the applicants follow scientific guidance. Of course, it is just advice for them to follow scientific guidelines when developing veterinary medicinal products. And I think that the important mention here is that whenever applicants, of course, the applicants are free to deviate from guidance. Guidelines are not considered legislation. However, in case the applicants choose to deviate from existing scientific guidelines, they need to justify this deviation. And of course, from this point of view, any deviation can also be discussed in a framework of scientific advice or through a scientific advice procedure, and I will refer at a later stage to this. With regard to scientific guidelines and areas where these are developed, basically scientific guidelines are available in all general parts of product development relating to quality, safety, and residues efficacy, but also specialized areas like antimicrobials, novel therapies, immunologicals. And I will, with the last bullet point on this slide, I would like to make the connection to the next one in relation to the fact that these guidance documents are usually published for public consultation, and input from stakeholders is expected and very much valued when preparing the final guidelines. And how this works, it is in relation to this public consultation applies to a number of types of documents from concept papers, reflection papers, scientific, but also scientific guidelines. How it works is that in the beginning of the process, when developing a guideline or revising a guideline or developing a reflection paper, usually the CVMP prepares a concept paper, and that is designed just to promote the idea to the stakeholders, explain why a new guideline is necessary, and provide very little information on how this guideline will look like. And then this concept paper, you see it on the bottom of this slide. The concept paper is published for consultation for a time frame, and then comments received from stakeholders are already taken into account when drafting the guideline. After that, the CVMP, through its working parties, develops the draft guidance document, which is again published for public consultation, and again stakeholders are invited to provide comments and suggestions on this draft document. After the finalization of the public consultation, stakeholders' comments are considered, and very important, I would like to highlight that they are taken into account when the final version of the document is prepared. So basically all comments received are gathered in an overview of comments document, and also in which every comment is responded by the CVMP, and it's either accepted, partially accepted, or rejected. But it is very important again to highlight that in any case, explanation is given for any action the CVMP takes on a particular comment. So this is how the final document is results, and it is published then for to be used by the applicants. And again, at the bottom of the slide, you see here a link with where more information on scientific guidelines can be found. The third procedure from this point of view is the scientific advice procedure, which on which yesterday there was also a brief mentioning on scientific advice procedure. I will only want to focus on the procedural steps in relation to scientific advice request. If you remember from the roadmap to product development, scientific advice is usually a step which takes place later in the product development. However, it is very relevant to product developers. The scientific advice can be is available to basically any type of applicant, including commercial enterprises, but also research organizations and academics, and it can be applied for at any stage of the product development, for instance, in the initial product development or in the post-authorization phase. For veterinary medicines, the scientific advice is given by the CVMP on the recommendation of the scientific advice working party. How it works? It is a process. Again, very detailed information is given on the MA website. You have the resources at the bottom of the slide, but basically, very briefly, the applicant poses specific questions on development of VMP. These questions can address or can cover any aspect of the product development from quality, safety, and efficacy. It can cover quality, safety, and efficacy issues. However, it is very important that the questions are presented as clearly as possible. And how it works, usually the applicant also presents their own view on how to address that particular question in or that particular issue in the product development. And the CVMP gives advice then on developer's proposal, agreeing or disagreeing, or providing suggestions to the applicants. Scientific advice, a very important mentioning here, scientific advice is not legally binding. And it is important, this is a very important point to make. It is not legally binding on the MA and CVP, nor on the medicine, nor on the applicant. Then the fourth type of support provided by DMA is in relation to small and medium-sized enterprises, and the topic is relevant for today's discussion and today's session related to academia, because many universities develop spin-offs which can be regarded and classified as SMEs, or there is also the possibility of collaboration and partnership between universities and small and medium enterprises. In this environment, SMEs are considered an important source of innovation and development of new medicines. And from this point of view, the DMA provides incentives and support for SMEs, which develop medicines for human and veterinary use. For this, a DMA, an SME office is available, which provides advice, guidance, and assistance to SMEs to find their way through the centralized authorization procedure. There are also SME briefing meetings possible. Any type of questions can be addressed during these meetings. And in order to benefit from these incentives, those SMEs need to be a SME status assigned by DMA. There's a process for this. You have it on the bottom of the slide, how to apply for the SME status. It relates to fulfilling a number of conditions related to a number of employees and turnover, yearly turnover, but I will not get into this type of details. What I would like to emphasize is that once the SME status has been granted to that particular SME, the company is included in EMA's public SME register. And this is considered important because this way it can facilitate and promote interaction, partnering, and networking between SMEs. The support for SMEs provided by the agency includes two types of support. And the first one is related to fee exemptions and reductions for regulatory procedures. And the second one is related to translation assistance. I will not get into very many details in relation to that one. Just a few examples in relation to the first bullet point with the fee reductions and exemptions. For instance, for scientific advice procedures, there is a 19% reduction in the fee for SMEs, which is can be considered significant. Then for inspections, pre-authorization, post-authorization inspections, there is again a 90% reduction in the fee. For applications for establishment of MRLs, maximum reduced limits, there is again a 90% reduction of the fee. For applications for initial marketing authorizations, there is a fee deferral until the end of the procedure. So if the procedure is successful, the applicants only need to pay the fee at the end of the procedure and not upfront as in other cases. There are other types of support for post-authorization procedures. So there are many advantages for SMEs in relation to fees, exemptions, reductions, or deferrals in regulatory procedures. And again, at the bottom of the slide, you have a link to the financial advantages for SMEs. The second bullet point, the translation assistance, is related to when we say translation assistance, it is in relation to the translation of the product information for approved veterinary medicinal products. Any veterinary medicinal products is followed by a set of information gathered into two main areas. The first one is the summary of product characteristics, and the second one is the package leaflet, the package insert which comes with the product within the box. And these just because we are talking about centralized procedure here, and the approved products at centralized level will be available, can be available in any EU member state, then these documents need to be translated in all EU languages, and this can be proved rather costly. For SMEs, this translation assistance is provided by the EMA. That means that all product information for EU languages is translated by the EMA and offered free of charge to the applicants. The applicants only, just a clarification here, the applicant only needs to provide translations for Icelandic and Norwegian languages. So this is again considered very useful by the applicants. The second part of my presentation, and I will go very briefly through it, is in relation to information and communication, because it is considered important to inform all our participants from academia and from all our stakeholders from this category on a number of ways, modalities where we can or how we can disseminate information, spread the news, and also provide information on the agency's activities. The first one is related to newsletters. We have two different types of newsletters. The first one is in relation to the first newsletter is prepared by the Veterinary Medicines Division here at the EMA. It's called Veterinary Medicines Highlights. It's published quarterly and focuses on news activities and interviews from the division at the EMA. Also, the SME office prepares a newsletter where they again provide news and guidance of relevance to SMEs, and also they also inform on events and training opportunities in relation to SMEs. The second one, as a source of information where a lot of details can be found, is the EMA's corporate website. In this regard, we have a separate academia news page and also an academia dedicated landing page with a lot of information and useful links, and which can be accessed and used by academics. And then at the end of my presentation, of course, we are also present on social media. You see here 3 different platforms, LinkedIn, X, and YouTube, where the EMA has dedicated pages and channels, and where information is disseminated, interviews, and also press conferences are made available. So with this, I think that this is the end of my presentation. I thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to take any questions. So Tony, over to you.
Yeah, thanks very much again for that, Valentin, taking us through the whole raft of possibilities whereby we try to foster the uptake of innovation, not just in methodology development, but also in their application translation into medicines, hopefully ending up in products in the hands of veterinarians and users. Do we have any specific questions to Valentin's intervention at this stage? Online, I'm looking. Yeah. It's not the case. Okay, very good. So, dear colleagues, we're into a more general sort of Q&A session now, and we'll keep it going for so long as there is the demand. So basically, to kick it off again, so same question then to the attendees, if they want to ask any questions of the session or any sort of comments, even observations, either to individual presenters, so that's Ralph, Anna, and Valentin, or the whole session, or what you feel anyway about the agency's attempts to reach out, bridge, and collaborate with the academic sector more generally. So I can again wait for anything coming in on the online function. Hopefully it's enabled, because I wouldn't like to think it's silent simply because of a technical glitch rather than a mental one in addition. Yeah, but while we're waiting for that, actually we are joined. I don't know what the visualization, I think you do see it online there, so you can see there's a number of colleagues around the table here, not just the panel of presenters that I'm moderating at the moment. And I do think we have a question just here from the room, so we'll kick off with that.
Harold Krona is my name, from Austria. I have just a quick question to get a feeling about the dimensions. How many SMEs contact you a year for support? Is it
I would give you some examples of contacts with SMEs in relation to applications for different types of procedures, because it is very relevant to understand the dimension of this. So, for instance, there is the SME office publishes yearly newsletter or highlights of related to their activity every year. And in 2020, I just recently I consulted their annual report for 2022, and I just learned from there that from in relation to scientific advice, for instance, there were for veterinary medicinal products strictly, so not referring to human products, for vet products, there were about 39 requests for scientific advice in 2022, out of which 12 came from SMEs. So basically, more than 30% of these requests came from SMEs, and that could be linked to the fee incentive they have for this. So they are very much encouraged also by this, because it is a well-known fact. It is understood that providing such a fee incentive stimulates SMEs to collaborate and engage and actually make some steps in this direction. In relation to, for instance, applications for veterinary medicinal products, there are I wouldn't want to give you not very documented figures, but at least in 2022 we had 3 initial applications for SMEs, and that is the whole package submitted for authorization by an SME, which is not negligible at all. So from the total pool of applications, SMEs take quite a good part.
Maybe just to complement that, because and even with the experience on the human side of things, the actual numbers of SMEs making it all the way with regards to product application and even post-authorization MAHs is never that high relative to what's the standard we're shooting for? What we tend to see, though, is that the innovation lies with academia, and the innovation lies with small, medium-sized, even micro enterprises, less than 10 people, guys. And often they're spin-outs from academia, and they're even fostered then in some of these sort of development incubator hubs around Europe and indeed the world. But what then happens is, and it's just the law, the jungle, the law of the market, then some of the more promising developments get taken up even before maybe the full clinical evaluation is done, if they're particularly promising. And then the commercialization of them is done either by mid-cap pharma or indeed big pharma, in a sense, if we can use those sort of descriptors. But honestly, does that really matter? Because so long as an innovative method, product, or whatever technology gets into the hands of the end user, the fact that it was originated by an academic and or an SME is a good thing, because that's the wellspring of creativity. It certainly doesn't reside inside regulatory authorities, I can assure you. And I mean, so that's what we're about, is fostering those sort of seedlings, the nursery in a way, and then, yeah, absolutely helping them on the development journey, because ultimately, if we as regulators have to sign off on it, then the development program has to be done to what are sort of European, or if not internationally accepted standards. But it's always it's a great question. And I mean, the contacts at the beginning are frequent, and it's not just the more formal, like the innovation task force meetings, etc., but it's even those telephone contacts with rather simple questions about, am I even a medicinal product, which may be not that simple, actually. Yeah? And it's very important for developers, innovators, to know what they're sort of dealing with, and what the regulatory expectations in both Europe and abroad can be. And a lot of that small stuff actually isn't very visible. You'll find it in our annual reports, sort of line 27, table 22. It's very micro. But one way of thinking of it is, this is pretty much a free regulatory advice service. And I can tell you there's many commercial offerings in that regard. And often some of the quality of the commercial advice, is well, let's say less than optimal compared to what we might want to say or advise you as regulators. So it's hopefully that, I mean, when we say we want to foster the uptake of innovation, the whole idea is to provide these low entry points that you can knock on the door, and there's no such thing as a stupid question. And in fact, an awful lot of the questions can be, complex simply because you're taking us into uncharted territories. But I think the commitment we give, and I've got Ivo Claesson here sitting to the left of me, that we will be at least engaged with it and endeavour to give you a somewhat helpful response to the best of our abilities. Yeah. Sorry if that's a bit long-winded, but it's an interesting question primarily. Anything more, Ivo, please?
No, I think well spoken, Tony. No, the power for innovation is indeed with SMEs, academia. That's where the ideas come from. And yesterday we had a whole session on AMR, but we linked that directly to innovation, and because this is an area where specifically for the veterinary arena, I would say we're not expecting new antimicrobials to come through that pipeline for veterinary purposes, given that we have to reduce the use of antimicrobials. There's a ban on prophylactic use of antimicrobials. So new novel therapies, novel technologies will need to emerge to possibly fill in a therapeutic gap that we will have if we can't use antimicrobials as we do them right now. That's specifically an area where I do feel that at early interaction with developers, early interaction with academia, identifying where the needs are and see how we can fill in those needs is extremely important. That's why I think this session provides it. My question would be that despite all these let's say, facilitators that we've put in place for that interaction with small, medium-sized enterprises and academia. Why are we struggling to be in those contexts? We're developing. It's relatively new for the veterinary division to develop that, so maybe a startup phase. But maybe we're missing something. Maybe we're not sufficiently aware of what are the incentives for academia to actually interact with us. And I trust that there's academia listening to this session. We've got about 100 participants in here. And if anything, that's what I would like to learn from this session and maybe from future interactions. What can we do better as an agency to really enter into that collaboration that will bring mutual benefit to the regulatory authorities as well as to the developers, and in the end, result in products on the market that are needed. And whether it's alternatives to antimicrobials or other products, that doesn't really matter in this sense. Over.
That was an appeal to our online audience to sort of share with their view on that in terms of what the agency's offering is in this regard. I mean, honestly, sessions like this, because it's like I've heard descriptions that like it's almost like parallel universes sometimes in terms of the regulatory system at the industry developing products in the sort of regulatory frame, and then there's an academia and with the sort of research funders. But then the ultimate product there is you live or die by scientific publications, and I think that's why in Ralph's presentation we were trying to make the bridge between the regulators have got to come out of the sort of grey literature type zone with regards to what we publish in regards to our guidelines, standards, approaches, and enter more into what is the mainstream of science, which is the scientific literature, and then that has to be enabled then by contact platforms such as this awareness day, so that we can somehow make these bridges even more as we go forward. At least that's what I've heard said before. Any more questions from the room, colleagues? Otherwise, no. Ralph, you want to?
If there are no questions, I think that's a very nice question also to follow up, if I may. We've tried to paint the picture that for me, I would describe as the EMA is evolving a support ecosystem for not-for-profit developers. And in that, We have certainly the soft landing that we tried to explain to all on the call, and seeing us here and saying we've got some experience, exposure to questions coming from academia, various types of interactions, etc. So we provide a soft landing to space. We can have these informal discussions, the brief exchanges to perhaps look at what is the next step, but we also want to make you aware of what are choices and options and what is the bigger picture. So that's one way of these direct interactions. But we have also, we see emerging that we have intermediaries such as technology transfer offices that come into this, that at universities, for example, have collected frequently asked questions of projects they are supporting. And this becomes also increasingly interesting for us because they are very helpful multipliers, but they also are more local. They have the finger at the pulse and can already help there. So in that support ecosystem that I see emerging on our side, I think these also play a role, and I just want to complete that as a picture for from whom we can hear about what academia are facing as challenges as one of the sources. And so Ivo, perhaps that's another aspect that also for the veterinary medicines can play a role. And in fact, we're trying to be cognizant of where such developers are. Where are the veterinary research centers that are engaged in regulatory science? We've got some ideas of where they are for the human medicines and are thankful for contacts we're having with lots of them. But also for the veterinary side, I think that's an interesting question. Whom are those? What is the landscape of universities and, as we call them, education establishments that are engaged really on that? So it's in motion, and we hope you give us more fuel to keep the wheels running and turning. Thank you.
That's an appeal. I mean, Ralph made an appeal, colleagues. I think he referred to maybe 60 veterinary academic sort of stakeholders in our stakeholder database. But can we be happy with that with a Europe of 27 member states? I don't think so. So we need to sort of populate that more. And honestly, it's that sort of awareness, to get the sort of overlapping between the two worlds, such that we can sort of communicate with you. And you vice versa with us, and the benefits. I think hopefully you'll have understood, at least from our perspective, the benefits that we see, and it's a multi-level benefits, guys. It's not just on individual product development. It's not just on methodology, because never discount that. Like methodologies themselves, they don't necessarily end up in products, but they end up in the development of products, and we're very happy to have discussions to advance the adoption of those sort of methodologies. Valentin very nicely also promoted the sort of ITF scientific advice and guidelines, mature guidelines, which we also hope aid the developer. But also the opportunities for you as individuals or as academic structures to engage in that sort of stepping stone. And in particular, the public consultation on guidelines. One of the reasons why guidelines emerge rather slowly from both Europe and indeed other regions is we sort of have to be careful about, is this the consensus position on any state of the art in any one topic area? And we really want to cross-check that with people in the know, because there's nothing worse in our system than a bad guideline that actually ends up blocking truly innovative applications or methodologies for no good scientific reasons. So we sort of accept that as a constant challenge. How do we can't just rest on our existing corpus of guidelines. We've always got to evolve that, and part of that intent you'll find online in the working party programs in terms of what we're trying to address. And it's very important that you also tell us what areas should be addressed, because again, it's not just that we have a certain view in it from applying it in medicines regulation, but you guys are genuinely at the cutting edge of the science, and that then also opens up areas where there isn't any pre-existing guidance, and how then do you navigate that development successfully in that sort of area. So that sort of consultative process, that opening to be influenced is a very genuine offer, which I think Valentin covered. Ivo, please. Yeah.
No, I would like to pick up on a number of things that have been said, and it's about. I mean, there's indeed certain ways that we can support academia, small and medium-sized enterprises in making a start to bring things to the market and through scientific advice. But it all relies on being able to ask the right questions also to us. And I've seen that not everything is suitable for a scientific advice question. And you rightly said that some of the developments that are taking place in academia or spin-offs and micro enterprises are being picked up by, mid-sized pharma or big pharma. And then, of course, they bring in that regulatory knowledge. We all know that at academia itself and in SMEs, having the proper regulatory knowledge is very often an issue, because they focus on the science, the proof of principle, and then think, this has to be a new product, but not always realizing how to bring that about. I think that's where we are not co-developers. We're not in the process from the start to beginning. FDA, in that sense, works in a different way. They can provide that more continual support, and I think there is a role here for veterinary consultants or people that have that regulatory knowledge, and that can really advise small, medium-sized enterprises and even academia on what it needs to bring it there, and also to ensure that specifically with novel therapies, new technologies, the right questions are being asked, and they can even help with classification of these products. We've seen a lot of, yesterday there was the discussion about borderline products emerging. Not everything is veterinary medicinal product, even if you may think it is. Very often it could be either a feed additive or a biocide, or and those questions, these are the essential questions. These are the basic questions that you should ask yourself first. What type of product is this? And hence, under which regulatory framework would this go? So two things, again, a plea for early interaction, but also where possible involve, advisors, consultants that can advise you on a number of very basic things and that can guide you in the process of asking for that scientific advice, or even entering into an ITF. But I think ITF is really, should be low entry level, can bring to us anything. And if we already in the first session conclude, we don't know about this product, is it a veterinary medicinal product, that can help in paving the way for further development. Over. Not a question, just a remark.
One other thing, maybe in just to complement what Ivo has said, and I couldn't agree more about framing the right questions. But even even that can be difficult, if you're at the sort of primordial stage. But honestly, the range of services that we've sort of and contact opportunities we've identified this morning is to help you with that, and certainly informally, before you even access some of these low threshold type of services, you can get some orientation just by writing to the agency or contacting the agency. It's sort of we do a lot of telephone briefings, etc. But one thing is that sometimes, to foster a development, I mean, if you're in the sort of research consortium, then of course the funding is clear. It's either external, it's European, it's national. And then on occasion, as Anna rightly described, sometimes we do direct funding as well. But in terms of scale, we're certainly not saying we can compete with something like Horizon Europe, which is the absolutely, massive sort of offering. And it's a great offering in Europe. So we should always be incredibly proud. And it's very important that we as regulators collaborate with that Horizon Europe offering, because it really is a flagship leader in the world. But often, one other thing that sustains, and all roads lead back to money, in what often kills early developments is that inability to step it up. So it's a great idea in the lab, but then if you have to, do a sort of take it into the either non-clinical or clinical sort of testing, those sort of step ups are incredibly costly. So you have a great proof of concept, but then how you get it into the next level isn't so clear. But there are various sort of step funding type offers in terms of sort of venture capital type offerings. But often venture capitalists, and this is what we hear from because we do have contact with the venture capitalist type industry, they say it's important that whoever is the inventor, creator of the novelty has some feedback from the regulatory system such that we know what we're dealing with. Because, it's one thing as Ivo says, you're dealing with a vet ATMP. It's quite another if you're dealing with a device, and because it's a different frame. And that route to market is also very important with regards to the value proposition of whatever you're developing. And in that sense, then a lot of the services that the colleagues have been laying out this morning is to try to help, with that understanding of the value proposition and how then you can reinforce its value, in this stepped kind of way. ITF is a low entry sort of threshold. SME designation is another. We have orphan designation possibilities as well. A minor use species equivalent then in the vet sector. If you get a scientific advice letter, and it's not a question of if, but when you get a scientific advice letter after having an interaction, that in itself can have an asset value with regards to your continued funding of your development. So it's really quite important that there is a good understanding of these various contact points and how then they can help you with regards to the value proposition of whatever innovation you're then developing. But again, that's just a set of observations from myself. So, dear colleagues, any more questions from around the room here or online? And again, if not, we'll draw it to a close, I think. Yeah, so hopefully, colleagues, we've laid out a sort of smorgasbord of possibilities. Ralph has given the sort of macro level from the agency's perspective, human vet integrated. Anna's then developed that with the vet specific reflection, primarily on the regulatory science projects. And that's super important to us, guys. Like, it's because that's the bedrock. And you could see that image in the pyramid. It is a reg science bedrock that then goes up through the scientific advice, ITFs, guidelines, hopefully ending up then in products and or novel methodologies applied either in the development of those products or maybe device assisting the delivery of those products. And that's increasingly with sort of biological type agents. A lot of them need a lot of assistance with regards to diagnostics and delivery systems. So hopefully that's sort of well understood. And Valentin closed it off then with the very stepped interaction and also the importance of just general awareness with that sort of dissemination material that we push out, the newsletters, the vet sort of highlights, SME newsletters, etc. It can be overwhelming, but honestly, there's a number of us set here, and our main purpose in life is try to help you not be overwhelmed with it all, and to hopefully guide you through whatever stage or step in your development and or research project that you're interested in. So with that being said, colleagues, I'd like to, I don't know if you can indicate, it's strange in this online virtual world, but if you can indicate with usual emojis or whatever, what you think of the speakers. I can join in a sort of physical applause here in the room, but it's got to be nothing compared to the 100 online. But yeah, if you can, that's probably, the love hearts are even better appreciated, so, but clapping will do, more conventional, more love in the world, And I look to my senior chair, Dr. Claston, that we resume at 11:30 after a coffee break. A bit of a debrief from both sessions. So if you missed anything in the animal welfare and vice versa, you'll get to hear that. And we continue with the rest of the program. So bye-bye and thank you very much, colleagues.
Thank you.
Thank you.